So I'm sure a lot of you watched the debates tonight, and you know, doesn't it bother you that because you're a Western imperialist society, that countries are more competitive and cutthroat than corporations? You would never hear about Microsoft and Apple talk about each other the way America talks about Iran and Russia and China. That's really what Obama and Mitt Romney come down to. Mitt Romney is more concerned about Russia because Russia and Chinese have kind of a thing going with each other, and they are in economic competition with America, and they're winning. Whereas Obama is more interested in Iran because, well, that would be good for the war-based economy that America runs on, and the fact that, Israel and America are tightly knit, and the fact that, well, they've pretty much decimated the rest of the Middle East, you may as well get it done with Iran, and things like that. So, in reality, both of them are imperialists. They just have a different direction they would like to take the imperialism in. And ultimately, it will come down to what their employers tell them to do anyway. I truly believe that Obama and Mitt Romney believe what they believe, that when they say something, they do mean it, but at the end of the day, they will listen to their corporate overlords. So it really doesn't matter what they're saying. But I digress from the matter. But the fact is that nations are more competitive than businesses. So where does capitalism fit into everything? Clearly, capitalism isn't benefiting anybody. And on top of that, you don't even understand that nations are trying to compete with one another violently if need be to have this hegemony upon the world. That's what concerns me. What concerns me is that nobody in the States wants to talk about why Iran wants to develop nuclear weapons. I mean, some people argue that Iran doesn't, that they just want to have nuclear power and things like that. But let's say that they do want to make a nuclear weapon. What would be the motivation behind that? I mean, really, do you honestly think Iran just wants to destroy the world like they're a comic book supervillain? No. The only reason they would want to make weapons is either A, to destroy Israel because the religion tells them to or something, which guess what? Israel does that already to them because of their religion, etc. So why is it okay for Israel to do it but not Iran? Or B, because they want to have some kind of self-protection. They want to have some kind of great equalizer that if Iran has nuclear weapons, they have leverage. Because if you fuck with Iran, they can launch those nukes and then we're all fucked. Mutual assured destruction. Israel has nukes, America has nukes, China has nukes. This is why they don't fuck with one another. They might bicker, they might talk shit about each other, they might try to economically control one another, but you know why you will never see that kind of war? Because they know it would ensure mutual destruction. And Iran probably wants part of that. Iran probably wants to secure the fact that Iran has just as much of a right to exist as all these other nations. And the best way to do that would be to have nuclear weapons. So by saying that Iran does not have the right to build nuclear weapons, you are saying Iran does not have a right to exist in the first place. But every other country in the world does. Every other country gets to exist. Every other country gets to secure its culture and its identity, but somehow Iran doesn't. And I'm not saying that a country does have the right to secure its identity. That's what's going to be in my book. I don't believe in cultures. I don't believe in religions. I don't believe in identity. I don't believe that somehow you have this right to define yourself as a specific group. But what I am saying is that is the world you live in. And if you live in that world, then that just makes you all the more despicable that you are willing to say, I have the right to my identity, but this guy over here doesn't have the right to his identity. And this guy over there has the right to his identity, but somehow this guy doesn't. Why? How? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And they're never going to talk about that. They're never going to bring that up in the debates, and no one's ever going to, just proclaim that. And if they are, they're going to be on the wild left, they're going to be on the tangent field. Even the so-called libertarians that are anti-war and shit won't mention that because they're really not anti-war. They're just anti-government spending. But the fact is, they would have just as many Blackwater mercenaries in there and shit, and most of them are racist as fuck. So, they would still continue with the wars. They would still support the American military-industrial complex. And as much as they talk about how government spending is out of control and shit, they would not cut the military budget. They firmly believe that the military is a legitimate form of government. So, out of everything that exists in government, libertarians are like, no, you can't have welfare, you can't have roads, you can't have subsidies, but you can have a fucking military to go shoot some innocent brown people. Oh, that makes sense. Government does not have a place in the world to provide for us and to secure our existence, but it has a legitimate right to kill people, and it has a legitimate right to kill foreign people for the interests of major corporations. Oh, isn't that something? So, it just makes me sick in so many different directions, and it's so much to go into, and no one's even going to touch the surface upon it. And, this isn't a radical leftist view. It's not like that what I'm saying here has anything really to do with communism. It's just the fact that that's the way it is, and nobody seems to fucking care. The fact is that Iran is just made up of people, just like anywhere else. Whether or not you believe that the government there is absurd and corrupt, the same could be said about your country. The same could be said about any country, really. And somehow, they don't have the right to secure their own existence the way that the first world does. And that's why there's Maoist forms of communism, and that's why a lot of the Middle East has become radical Islamists, because they see that. Because they see that the first world doesn't view them in the same light that they view themselves. They look at them as inferior people. So, naturally, as a reaction to that, they're going to form Islamic nationalist movements. And that's where the term reactionary comes from. Because they're reacting in a way that the imperialists want them to react in. They're reacting in response to direct conflict, and the reaction is feeding into this. It is feeding into this perpetual race war, this perpetual class war, all to the benefit of arms dealers, all to the benefit of a cultural elite, all to the benefit of a cultural monopoly, and nobody seems to fucking care. So, if I were on that stage running for president, I would say that no, we don't need to go to war with Iran, and to even conceive the idea is insane and criminal and destructive. And not only would I never go to war with Iran, but I would stand back and let Iran do what it's got to do. Because, yes, I don't believe we have the right to a culture. I don't believe... I wouldn't say we don't have the right to a culture. What I mean to say is having a culture is destructive. Having a culture is cancerous. This idea that we're all different is what's killing us. So, no, I don't believe that Iran is its own sovereign state, but neither do I believe that my country is its own sovereign state or whatever. There is no race, there is no religion, there is only human ingenuity. But, since we live in a world where people think that their culture or their nation or their religion or their race or whatever somehow distinguishes them, then Iran has as much of a right to exist within that field of judgment. Within that moral, standard, Iran does have the right to exist. And within my moral standard, Iran does not deserve to be attacked. I'll put it that way. Either way, it's wrong to go to war with them. But that will never be discussed, because it's not to the interests of major national corporations. So, I guess that's just something to think about, because, they're always talking about foreign policy. Foreign policy makes up 99% of all politicians' bread and butter. And the fact is, it's just the most skewed, despicable position they have out of all of them. So, I guess that's it.